What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor, but today we are going to be talking about Australian Survivor, the newest season that just started airing this past week. Australian Survivor Heroes versus Villains, episode 1, and whether you should check out Australian Survivor while we're on this little US Survivor hiatus. So, my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and in case you guys don't know, the basic background of this is Rachel watches Australian Survivor pretty regularly. I don't really. I watch a couple of episodes here and there, but I don't think I've sat down and watched a whole season of Australian Survivor. They do things very differently than they do in the US, so we'll talk about that when we talk about whether or not you should watch this season.
Yeah, so I guess one of the differences, Australian Survivor, they were in Australia during the pandemic. But this current season, Heroes versus Villains, they are in Samoa again, bringing it back to their roots. Season 1, they had it in Samoa, and now they're back in Samoa. So that is a difference from US Survivor, where for the past many seasons in the US, we have just been in Fiji. So if you're looking for some change of scenery, Australian Survivor is moving around and isn't in Fiji or Australia this season.
Yeah, and I understand why they stayed in Australia throughout the course of COVID, just because it made filming so much easier for them. But yeah, I was really excited when it came up that they were going to be on Samoa. Or in Samoa. So I was really happy about that.
And even for us as Americans, their seasons in Australia were very, very interesting and fascinating too. Similar to Survivor South Africa, they started filming in South Africa during the pandemic. And so, as you know, not a native person from those areas, it was cool to see them in their homeland filming the season. So, it's also cool to see them move around and go to other places like they are here.
Yeah, I mean, I think when COVID first started, we had talked about where in the United States would make for a good, Survivor season. So I think it's interesting that US Survivor has never tried to stay close to home.
Yeah. So with Australian Survivor Heroes versus Villains here, this is a newbie versus returnee season. So it is half returnees and then half new people, sort of like with US Survivor, it's like a fans versus favorite season where you have here 12 people that are returnees and 12 people that are brand new to the show, never have played Survivor before. They're coming into the show, and then they're split into these heroes versus villains categories. For me, I feel like we've talked about it last week when we were talking about the Traitors US, how the Traitors split. Okay, half the cast are reality TV stars and half the cast have never played reality TV before. I personally am not a fan of these mixed seasons where some people are returnees, some people are newbies, because I feel like either way that you split it, if the returnees go far, okay, all the newbies, they are basically fodder to be voted out. They don't get much screen time. You're like, who the heck is this? I don't really care about this person. Or on the other hand, if all the returnees get targeted first, then you're like, dang, all my favorites got voted out so quick. This sucks. So to me, it's like a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, I feel like the newbies, especially in this first episode, I feel like there was so much more focus on the returnee players and any beef they might have with each other. Because one of the interesting things about this season is they have several pairs of people who were together on their original seasons. Like they have George and Haley, and Haley beat George in the final tribal council. They have Stevie, and I forget the girl's name.
Yeah, Shawnee.
Shawnee, yeah. And Shawnee was the one who helped blindside Stevie, and it's just they have a lot of past drama because Australian Survivor, this is the 8th season of Australian Survivor, correct?
Something like that. The numbers, it's interesting because US now, it's okay, 41, 42, 43. I don't really know the numbers for Australian Survivor because they do the theme. So I just remember the theme.
Well, basically, Australian Survivor doesn't have as many past seasons to draw from. So when they do returnee seasons, it's a lot more likely that they're going to have several people who are from the same season together because they just have fewer seasons to draw from. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think in an interview, JLP said that next season would be all newbies, which is good, I think, because the past few seasons of Australian Survivor, so like last season was Blood versus Water, and that was also mixed, some returnees, some new people, and then even like I don't know. I'm just not a fan. So I'm glad that they're going back to, okay, let's have a full newbie cast, or if they do another All Stars season, a full returnee cast, but stop mixing them up like this. But also, I think, Alyssa, I'd like to hear your thoughts with like at least episode 1. Do you think they gave enough backstory for these prior relationships? I feel like with Australian Survivor, since it does air 3 times a week right now, it's like the first week. So episodes 1, 2, and 3 is like the premiere episode. So for me, I feel like watching the first 3 episodes this week, even though you didn't see a lot of people episode 1, you got to hear more people's backstories episode 2 and 3.
Yeah, I feel like there was just so much going on this first episode. I kind of wish that instead of touching on anyone's backstory, they would have just like introduced them and then like gone into deeper thing. Because I feel like part of it is I just heard so much about stupid George, and it's like I don't care that much about George. So yeah, I feel like I got a grasp on some people, but not on a ton of them, and it's like yeah, I was kind of confused some of the relationships that people had. I think it also doesn't help that there's a lot of people this season who to me look similar because there's so many blonde women this season. So just like yeah, there's so many blondes. What the heck?
Yeah, I would say there's probably like 3 to 4 blonde women on each of the tribes. And so the first episode, you really get to know just like Shawnee, who's a returnee, and this is her 3rd time playing Australian Survivor. And then all the other blonde women you don't really get to hear from until like episodes 2 and 3.
Yeah. So I was like, there was one scene where Shawnee was talking with another blonde woman, and I was like, who even is this? Like, who are you talking to? Is it just a mirror? So
So I would say I do like Australian Survivor. The cinematography is always so good. Like watching those intro packages, watching the first 10 minutes of the show, the shots that they get, the camera work, I always have chills. It is so fun to see. And I do like their intro packages when they're introducing people. It has videos from their home life or whatever thing that they're known for or whatever their job is, or if they're famous for like footy or AFL, they have clips of them playing the sport that they're known for. So I really love these intro packages that Australian Survivor has. And I feel like we've talked about it before. Oh, US Survivor should do these kinds of intro packages. And it sort of seems like US Survivor is going in that direction a little bit. Like, oh, with Tiffany, they had her little intro package show when she got the call getting off the alternate list for Survivor. So little things like that, I do like to see these people in their job or in their home life or in their sport shown on the show rather than just saying like, yeah, I'm a sport legend.
yeah, I think also one of the things is Australian Survivor like does these intro packages pretty consistently. I think until US Survivor starts doing them more consistently, people are gonna read way too far into them.
Mm.
So I enjoy them. Like I thought the one that they did for Stevie was super cool because it showed like him like training to take out Shawnee. But yeah, I think I since I didn't see the other 2 episodes, I'm curious like if more than just the returnees got the intro packages because I think the only newbie player who I remember getting an intro package was Rogue, and it was like her um you know her documentary about people shooting elephants in Africa or lions in Africa or whatever. So it's kind of like I would like to see all of the returnees or all of the newbies get an intro package, especially if they're going to get voted out soon. Like Anjali, who got voted out the first episode. Spoilers, I guess. Sorry, but Anjali, who got voted out the first episode, like I feel like I didn't really see much of her except for her like walking into a CNN studio, and it's like, okay, cool, but like that doesn't tell me anything about your life. like the journalists were just so big on the fact that like, oh, I'm a journalist, and it's like you do realize that journalism covers so many different things. Like, what kind of journalist? How does it help you to be cutthroat in journalism if your like beat is like celebrity gossip, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, I like the intro packages. I think they're always fun to see. And throughout this first week, episodes 1 through 3, the like returnees got packages and some of the newbies got packages. With the editing that you were talking about, I do agree. I feel like if you don't get an intro package, like week 1 or week 2 of Australian Survivor, and you get your intro package, okay, the week that you're about to go home, that could be read into with like editing or edgic. And it's like, okay, if you're getting this intro package, the episode you're about to get voted out, that's not good editing, I feel like.
Yeah.
So would you want to be a hero or a villain, Alyssa? Because I feel like some of these distinctions of heroes versus villains, especially even for the returnees, but for the new people as well, it's like, oh, the distinction here is a little bit iffy. I feel like it was funny in the episode 1. One of the men, he was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a villain because," I thought he was going to say like, "Oh yeah, I murdered people or something." Then he's like, "I'm a villain because I'm a real estate agent," and I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, like some of them I was like, okay, I can see how you can like draw the association that it's a villain. Like someone who like works for a luxury car brand, you can be like, oh, luxury cars are a symbol of excess wealth, and a lot of people who drive luxury cars are jerks. But yeah, I feel like I don't know. Just watching this first episode, I would want to be a hero because the heroes seemed much more functional than the villains. Like I feel like the problem with the villains, and this is kind of also something I feel like we saw in US Survivor, is the villains all like have so much ego and like so many chips on their shoulders where it's like they just it was a little nauseating to hear them all talking about how great they are and how smart they are and how they're going to outsmart everyone. Because I'm just like, oh my God, you're exhausting. Like, you're not the greatest thing to ever happen to my television screen. I promise. So I don't know. I feel like in general, I felt like the villains were performing a lot more. Either that or they just are much like much more interesting people than I am. So I'd want to be a hero just because of like, you know, having a more functional tribe and not having to be surrounded by all of these people talking about how smart they are constantly. But
Ooh, that's a good point. Because I would think, oh, I'd want to be a villain because, like they say, villains have more fun. Depending on your tribe, we saw this first episode. Okay, the heroes, they just have, it seems like a stronger tribe in general. So you'd probably want to be on the heroes in this instance because they have the stronger people for the challenges. But I feel like, yeah, maybe you've changed my mind because I would say, oh, yeah, villains, that would be more fun. But I don't know if I could deal with all those egos. So maybe I would say heroes too because I could not deal with that for 24/7.
yeah, I do think it's interesting because a villain won Survivor or Survivor US's Heroes versus Villains. I'm interested to see if a hero will win Survivor Australia's Heroes versus Villains. And I also wonder, like you said, how much of it comes down to just the cast? Because I feel like a lot of times people like they'll cast the most interesting villains, not necessarily looking at like, oh, a lot of times the heroic archetypes end up being like the super strong guys, and the villainous archetypes end up being like kind of scraggly. So I do wonder if they like looked at tribe strength as, you know, something that they considered when they were doing the casting calls.
After week 1, the tribes are not that equal, it seems like, with these very, very physical challenges. That's one thing that I do like about Australian Survivor is that the challenges are very unique. They don't really like reuse a lot of the same kinds of challenges like in the US. The challenges in Australian Survivor, they are way more physical. So that's a harder thing. I think if you're less athletic or less athletic looking, you might get voted out early just because the challenges require a lot of brute strength and brute force, which might lead to maybe, more women or more weaker looking people getting voted out earlier. And I think with the Heroes tribe, Sean is just a beast. He is 6'7", and I had a friend in college who's also 6'7", and yeah, Sean is like the Australian Jonathan here, just doing things on his own, doing everything. I'm like, dang, this guy is so strong, awesome.
Yeah, I think one thing about Australian Survivor is I like that their challenges are like more unique, but I also think they maybe need to dial back a little because I feel like every season of Australian Survivor that I've heard of has had like at least one medical evacuation. And so it's kind of like if you're evacuating someone at least once a season because your challenges are causing them injury, like I feel like this might be just my bias, but I feel like a lot of times in US Survivor, if someone gets medically evacuated, it's not directly because of a challenge. It's because like they hurt themselves and then it got infected or something like that. So I guess again, no, I guess I already spoiled who went home. But anyways, like this first challenge that they had, two people had to be like looked at to see whether or not they could continue in the game. And that's kind of like if your very first challenge causes not one, but two people like to be injured seriously enough that they maybe had to be removed from the game, that's not good. So I think the US Survivor people and the Australian Survivor people should be like locked in a room together so that the Australian people can make Survivor US more interesting and the US people can make Survivor Australia a little safer. So
A
that's
happy
just my
medium.
idea. Yeah.
Which is interesting because, yeah, last season, Nina got medevac, to Sandra's daughter. Nina is back on this season playing again. And then I think we talked about it before, but this is the medevac that I just can't get over with Australian Survivor. Ross, in one of the Champions versus Contenders season, it was like a rope swing, and then the rope broke, and then he fell and like literally shattered his ankle. And with the Champions versus Contenders season, those seasons it has like a lot of people that are famous athletes, and so Ross is or was a big wave surfer. And so after this Australian Survivor accident medevac where he shattered his ankle, like he hasn't been able to big wave surf since. And it's like, geez, that was his whole life prior to coming on the show, and like he was a professional athlete, and then to have your ankle messed up from a rope breaking in a challenge, it's just so terrible. So it's like, what is up? Where's the challenge testing, especially in episode 1 here? You didn't think, okay, rolling over these blocks into like a 1-foot-inch ditch of muddy water is not going to potentially hurt someone, even if you say like, yeah, make sure you flip when you roll over the block, or here's how you roll over the block correctly. When you're rushing through the challenge or people yelling at you, maybe your body just falls the way it falls. And that's where we see Jackie and George go to the hospital this episode. And so it's sort of like, where was the testing, I guess? Did no one think that this part should be replaced? You could just crawl under a net in the mud and you get a similar kind of thing rather than rolling over barrels into small ponds of water, or maybe make the water deeper so you're not going to hit the bottom kind of thing. And I don't know, even in the immunity challenge this episode, the running through sticks, it's okay, yeah, cool to look at, but we've seen this challenge in Australian Survivor multiple times. And every time I see these people run through the big thing of bamboo looking sticks, I'm like, someone's going to get their eye poked out.
Yeah, I remember the first episode of Australian Survivor that I watched, there was an immunity challenge where you had to jump down into like a net area to like continue with the challenge. And they kept like stressing, like, you have to jump this certain way, you have to jump this certain way, otherwise you could break your ankle. And it's like, maybe just don't have a challenge where jumping the wrong way breaks your ankle. Like, yeah. Again, I feel like it's one of those things where it seems like a pattern, and that's not good. So
Yeah, so we don't really hear Jackie and George. They go out, so they might be missing tribal council this episode. And then we learn that Jackie has a fractured collarbone, so she's out of the season, which is really sad. George, it's still up in the air at the end of episode 1, but spoilers, he does come back. He is in episode 2, and it's really sad at the start of episode 2. He has this confessional where he's crying, thinking, like, oh, what if like someone had to call my mom and tell her that I broke my neck or I'm paralyzed? And it was just really sad. Like something truly terrible could have happened and people could, broken more bones and things.
Yeah, and I also feel bad because we never really hear from Jackie. It's just someone else, like JLP being like, oh yeah, Jackie's not coming back. So we never get to hear like her thoughts about like the game, how she wishes she like could have whatever. So I don't know. I wish that they had given more time to that.
True. Jackie had no confessionals episode 1, and then she gets medevaced, which apparently the reason she had no confessionals was that they filmed confessionals after she already was medevaced and left. But I guess you could be like, okay, after Jackie's like healed a little bit, maybe a month later, you could have her film some confessionals to have something in there. But I guess I can see why she wouldn't have had any confessionals if they were filming it after the immunity challenge.
Yeah. Either way, I feel like that could have been like iPhone clip in the hospital, you know. So
just to see, how she's doing, because a fractured collarbone, that is very serious and very scary and just so sad. Like, oh, you're coming back to Survivor as a returnee and you break something episode 1, and it's not like a broken arm, like literally in your neck, which is so fragile.
yeah, and collarbones, because of like the way that like collarbones are involved in moving your arm, if you break your collarbone, you have to be in like a whole like halter type brace. So it's like collarbones are one of the hardest injuries to mend. Fun fact. So
Ouch.
it kind of sucks. And again, I feel like this is something that could have been foreseen with enough testing. So mm, mm.
Exactly. So at tribal council, JLP says Jackie is not returning. George may or may not be returning. And so he lets the villains cast, the team there, decide, okay, do you still want to vote someone out, or do you want to go back home, vote no one out, and then maybe George comes back tomorrow, maybe George doesn't come back tomorrow? I was on the side that I liked how they gave the villains team the option whether to vote someone off or not. I liked that. Other people online were saying that they didn't like that they gave them the option, but I liked it because it's sort of like it makes it more awkward for all of the people on the cast. And it's like, okay, do we go through with it? So Shawnee, she was nervous. Maybe she was going to get blindsided. Maybe she would push back and be like, no, I don't want to go through with it. And then on the other hand, Angeli, who is the person that gets voted out, was like, yeah, let's go vote. And then gets voted out because she chose to want to go and actually have the vote happen. And so in this kind of situation, I feel like you have to go through with the vote if you're the team that lost here, because if you went back to the camp, people are going to spread rumors like, oh yeah, they wanted you out, oh, we were going to vote you out episode 1, and then you could just cause so much friction. But if you just, okay, we decided we're voting you out, Angeli, we go ahead and do it, you just get rid of that person, even if you might be 3 people down if George doesn't come back.
I feel like I want to know what happened behind the scenes where production was able to offer them that choice. Because I feel like if worst case scenario, George didn't come back, I feel like that would be difficult on production, where it's like you're on the day where you're only supposed to have one person gone and you have 3 people gone. Like, how much wiggle room is there in the production schedule to,
how many more non-eliminations are they going to have?
Yeah. So that was just something I was thinking about, where I thought it was interesting that they like didn't make the choice for them, but I am curious like the behind the scenes stuff.
And I think with having the vote, with getting someone voted out, Shawnee sees her name didn't come up, even though she was nervous. People were trying to blindside her. Helps Shawnee see, hey, I can maybe trust these people. I wasn't being duped. People were telling me the truth, kind of thing. And you can work with these people. So I think it's good that she, at the end, reluctantly like raised their hand. Okay, let's go to the vote since it had to be a unanimous thing, and just sort of feels bad if you're the person being voted out and you got like forced into this because you didn't want to be the only person not raising your hand.
I mean, I guess you can make the argument that like if it was going to happen, it was going to
Yeah.
happen anyway. Like Anjali got voted out because she and George were in cahoots, and they knew that if George did come back, they didn't want him to come back and have his number one waiting for him. And so I feel like Anjali's days were numbered no matter what. So
Yeah, and it's just George in his first season, he talked a lot about the Macedonian Jesus, and it was just sort of here funny, ironic. The Macedonian Jesus saved George, but it took out his two Karas in Anjali and Jackie. So I just thought that was very ironic because George could have been voted out in the first episode here, but he was at the hospital getting treated. So he was saved from elimination here.
I mean, maybe it's a blessing in disguise for George, where maybe now people think like he is going to be an easy vote always, but he also now doesn't really have any social capital because a lot of the people left don't want to work with him. And also, he doesn't have his two major allies. So,
Yeah. How the chips fall. So I overall would say I recommend Australian Survivor. You can watch it, I guess, VPN, but also if you're on Facebook, join the group on Facebook called The Tribe Has Spoken. They usually post the episodes there, so you can watch them there.
yeah, I think I wouldn't recommend watching Australian Survivor, but that's also just because, like, me personally, I don't have an extra 3.5 hours every week to watch Survivor because, like, I'm in grad school right now, also have an internship. And so it's like, I don't have a lot of time to be watching Survivor 3 times a week. So that's just me. I think you need to weigh, like, your schedule versus, how much enjoyment you think you'll get out of it. Because I also like Australian Survivor, but I prefer US Survivor. So it's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, so the cast for Survivor US season 44 drops. So next time we see you all, we'll be doing our cast assessment. So that will be very, very exciting.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments down below whether or not you've watched Australian Survivor before, whether you recommend other people watch Australian Survivor before, and let me know what you think about George, because I find that man insufferable, but Rachel loves him, so I'm just beyond curious. So let us know all that and more in the comments down below, and